Crazy tax rates, scary paellas, and lazy Spaniards. Look, there are certain myths about this country that I just see over and over again. And even after 12 years of living in this country, there might even be a few of the myths that are coming up that I still believe myself.
So our challenge today is to put the proverbial nail in the coffin of these 10 Spain myths that refuse to die but must die.
So I think there's a myth or a misconception about Spain that tapas are this kind of ubiquitous, unified concept that if I go anywhere in Spain for lunch or dinner, I'm gonna eat tapas. It's just tapas. I'm gonna order tapas, I'm gonna eat tapas, I'm gonna see them on the menu. You know, I saw a guy who was doing a vlog and he was talking about how to budget for Spain. He said, you know, when you're traveling in Spain, you should budget for 2 or 3 tapas per person when you go out. And so it just makes tapas seem kind of simpler than the whole concept is, right?
So I think that the confusion comes that when we go to bars or tapas bars, the way of eating is sharing plate, sharing food, whether that is called tapas or not. In Madrid, for example, you might get a free tapa with a drink, but then you go to Seville and you will see the word tapa on the menu, or you can order also a bigger, a larger ración.
What about in San Sebastian? What would you get there?
So there you go, and you will get pinchos, which are individual tapas. So maybe the terminology and the way of ordering and the sizes vary, but what unifies everything is the act of sharing food. That is doing tapas, that is irse de tapas.
Okay, so in a survey a few years back, 770 Europeans were asked who are the laziest people in Europe, and 320 people said Spaniards. Only Greece was chosen more, where 328 people said Greeks. So
that's only because there were more Greeks in that survey, probably.
Or less Greeks.
Yes, true. I think it's a misunderstanding of our street culture. Our way to relax and have fun and socialize is to go out in the street and do things.
I love how non-specific that sounds. Go out in the street and do things.
Do things like what? Like have a cup of coffee with a friend, or have drinks with friends, or go for a meal with someone. Even go for a walk without spending money.
So what you're trying to say, Yoly, is actually once and for all, you are not the laziest people in Europe, apart from the Greeks.
Not at all. In fact, we work some of the longest hours in Europe. I found this graphic that shows how early we start working and how late we finish working in Europe, right? And while there were a few European countries that started earlier than us, we have the highest percentage of people that are still working at 8 p.m.
But there is a little wrinkle here. I found some data. Spaniards may work long hours, I will give you that, but studies do show that Spaniards aren't very productive.
Oh, we're so tired. I mean, how can we work that hard?
Well, there you go. There you go. But since 1995, Spain has become almost 20% less productive than the EU average, and our productivity is about 63% of the German productivity. 2 reasons. I thought they were interesting. One was a lack of training. And I see this. I don't think there is a strong culture here of when a new employee starts working in a company, they are really well trained. I don't think there's a culture of like, okay, you're going to be trained for 3 months while you're working in a structured way, blah, 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 blah. Would you agree?
Yeah, my experience being like, I was just given like a few instructions and it's like, oh, you'll learn. You know, you learn with time.
And the second reason, which I thought was very interesting, is that Spain has a higher proportion compared to the rest of Europe, and particularly Germany, of small companies. We have a lot of small companies, say 10 people or less. Whereas if you go to Germany and other countries as well, there's a lot more, the share of companies, a lot more bigger companies.
Yeah.
And I think in smaller companies, you know, you're 10 people, you're having to cover a lot of roles. And so it's a little bit more chaotic and hectic. Whereas the minute you get to a bigger company, like, you know, you might have in Germany, I'm obsessed with the Germans now, you know, everybody kind of has their role and their task. It's a bit more streamlined.
Yeah.
It's a myth that Spaniards are lazy, but you need to up your game a little bit in short. Okay, Yoly, we need to talk about paella. I see images online where people load their paella that they make with massive amounts of chicken and mussels and shrimp, and it's all covered in it. It's like a little rice base with all this seafood and meat on top of it.
You can see a tiny grain somewhere there.
And I also see people sometimes complain online because the paella they got in Spain at a pretty good restaurant only had 4 shrimp on it, or my paella only had 5 mussels. I got ripped off. Help us understand what's going on here. Please bathe us in truth.
A great paella is never determined by the protein on top. So the shrimp or the chicken or the calamari that you might find on top. That stuff is yummy, of course, but it's never the star. The star is the rice. That's what it's all about, right? In Valencia, a great paella master taught us that the 3 keys to a great paella are that the grains are intact, not broken, that the grains are separate, not all mushy and together.
I hate mushy paella.
And last but not least, that the rice is impregnated fully with the wonderful flavor of the stock that you've been cooking away for.
It's really like, that's what it's all about. It's like, does the grain have all that flavor?
Exactly.
Right?
Not about the protein. He never mentioned the protein on top.
He didn't mention it, guys. No mention of the protein. But also, I asked ChatGPT to create the world's worst paella. So Yoly, this is what it came up with. So
I love it.
What have we got here, Yoly? We've got
well, slices of pizza. That's pretty great. Oreo cookies.
fried egg lollies.
Yeah, lots of lollies actually. I can see sausages.
Look, you could put Oreos in your paella, but what the key is you must infuse the stock with Oreo flavor so that then the Oreo flavor impregnates the rice. Don't just put Oreos on top. That's cheating.
That won't work.
That's cheating. We're gonna bust one of Spain's most sacred myths now. So if you flick over the Spanish tourism website, it says that Spain is, according to one study, the healthiest country in the world, and a big part of that is largely thanks to the Mediterranean diet. First, what is the Mediterranean diet? So it's this notion that we eat a lot of legumes and nuts and fruit, a good amount of fish, but not really much meat at all, and we have a lot of olive oil on everything, right? That's basically what it is.
Well, yeah, fun fact, actually, the official Spanish dictionary includes wine in the definition of Mediterranean diet.
Yoly, what's the status of the Mediterranean diet? Because this is one that I think, this is a myth, to the extent that it's a myth, that Spaniards also believe.
Well, look, it does exist. You can find it in traditional recipes, recipes for soups, stews, rice dishes, even the habit of having fruit for dessert, you know.
Which you've always done, all these dishes.
Yeah, that's, you know, that's my everyday life, you know. It's there, but we're doing it less and less. And we're not eating that healthy anymore as we used to maybe a few decades ago. Also, we're doing way more processed food, fast food, Uber Eats. So, but this is more showing really the change of lifestyle. So, you know, with both parents working outside the house, and it's just not as easy to have like wonderfully cooked, really healthy meals every day, you know, with our lack of time and so on. An article titled Adios Mediterranean Diet, Spanish kids are amongst the fattest in Europe. 17% of young girls and 19% of young boys are obese in Spain. And it's not just the kids, over half the population in Spain is overweight. How about that?
Does that include us? Am I fat?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
Not anymore.
I was actually, but then I started to work out. So anyway, let's continue. We won't get into that. That's a whole other story. That's another video. And what I thought was interesting is recently a politician suggested that Spaniards should eat less meat. And there was this outrage. A lot of Spaniards identify meat as an important part of their identity.
Especially Iberian ham. They think it's as healthy as an apple.
And yet the Mediterranean diet is kind of like, you shouldn't eat much meat. So I think there's been a shift also, and actually we think we're eating the Mediterranean diet, but we're also loving a lot of meat, and that's part of our identity. So it's gotten very mixed up. So in short, the idea that we promote that we're all eating the Mediterranean diet is really a myth, but it's not a myth that needs to die. It's a myth of what needs to be returned to us. That's such a confusing way of saying it. What needs to come back, because we need to get back into it, right?
We need to research.
We need to research, yeah. I don't know what that means. Do we need to research? Research. Okay.
Research.
Yeah, that's all we need to do. Okay, so this one really drives me nuts. Yoly, can I just take this one and own it and have a rant?
All yours.
Okay, so as you know, I may have mentioned, I run a course called the Move to Spain Masterclass that helps people relocate to Spain, right? And so I'm exposed to a lot of Facebook groups where people talk about moving to Spain. And one thing that I see over and over again is people believing that if you move to Spain, you will pay 50% of your income in tax.
Ah.
Sometimes 45%, sometimes 48%. So we're gonna break this down and deal with it once and for all. Yeah, you could feel the once and for all coming, couldn't you? That was a once and for all moment. In Spain, like in most places in the world, we have what's called a progressive tax system, which means that you only pay higher tax rates on the income that falls within each higher bracket, not on your entire income. And I know this might feel a bit kind of, yeah, exactly. I couldn't find the word, but I'm glad you found it. I will give an example after this. So as your income increases and crosses into a new bracket, only the amount above the bracket's threshold is taxed at the higher rate. So let's take, for example, you earn 62,000 euros. So you're gonna pay 19% on the first, bracket. And then each bracket as it goes up. And the top bracket, as you see, where you pay 45%, you're only going to pay 45% on anything over 60,000 euros, which is 2,000 euros. You may still believe, and totally open to believe that Spain's tax rate is too high. But I think it's just really important that people understand how it actually works. And I think the other thing I see a lot of people seeing is that you have to cost out your whole life in Spain. And while tax rates might be higher in Spain than where you're coming from, property tax is really low here. Healthcare is very cheap here, relatively speaking. And so I think you have to look at it in a global perspective, right? So again, while I have your ear, if you are moving to Spain, remember that in the description below, there's some free resources for you if you're interested. There's a free guide that I've written about how to rent a home in Spain. There's a free guide about how to buy property, about how to buy a home in Spain. And there's also a free guide from my friends at Spartan FX, currency conversion experts, about how to move your money to Spain without paying crazy exchange rates or getting caught up in bureaucratic nightmares. So if you're moving here, check the description below. There's some free resources for you to download that hopefully will help out a little bit. Okay, rant over. I hope that's clear. I hope was I too intense?
A little bit.
Yeah, okay, good. That was actually necessary. That was my tough love moment.
That's okay.
So next up, I think there's a mythical perception that Spain is this place that's really cheap to visit and or to move to. And something I noticed and really stuck out for me is when I went to Valencia some months ago to interview some Americans who had moved there, one of the guys, Patrick, said the following.
You have people on these blogs saying, oh, you can live here comfortably for 1,000 euros a month, which is not accurate.
So Yoly, he had read a lot that like 1,000 euros was what you need to live in Spain. I don't know. Can you live on 1,000 euros? I mean, obviously people do, but what's the reality here? It's a little more complex, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can survive on 1,000 euros, but I mean, it used to be true that to be a mileurista, to earn 1,000 euros a month, was quite common more than 10 years ago, really. But I mean, nowadays, the minimum wage is 1,260 euros per month. And actually the fact that the minimum salary has risen by 47% in the last 4 years goes to show how much the cost of living has increased over the last few years. For example, housing is super expensive in Madrid and Barcelona, in the big cities, in the popular cities. But it is true that Spain is a country where you can have wonderful experiences for not much money. Public transport is quite cheap, eating out can be quite cheap as well, and just, the sheer walking around and just enjoying the vibe is free.
A lot of people, when they plan to come to Spain or move anywhere, they often don't do a budget, or they do a bit of a loose budget in their heads of what it will cost. And what I find with those loose budgets is people often forget all the different kind of line items or categories that you have in your life, of expenses that you have.
Yeah.
Do you go to the gym? Do you get your hair cut?
Do you buy presents for your friends?
Yeah, Christmas gifts. So I think you really need to pin down your cost of living where you are and then transpose it into Spain, see what those costs will be here. So I believe there remains the perception, the false perception, that Spain is really still a cash-based society and economy. The reality on the ground is different now, right?
Yeah, so I mean, there was a shift already happening before the pandemic, but of course, things accelerated with the pandemic. So right now, it's super commonplace to use even your contactless card to do payment. Over 20% of payments of some of the main banks are made via contactless, which is the highest amount in Europe.
You kind of have a little bit of coinage, for tipping and things like that, and you never know, because there are some restaurants where you will only be able to pay in cash. I hate those places because it's so obvious that they're not paying their taxes. Like, why else would we all have to pay in tax, right? So in short, as a tourist, have a little bit of cash, but really you can use contact, you can use your phone, you can use your card pretty much everywhere. So we couldn't dive into Spanish myths and destroy them all if we didn't touch on the siesta, the ultimate myth, right? Yoly, what is the state of the nation on the siesta? But first, do you have a siesta?
I wish. I do miss the days when I used to have siestas as a student. So I would go back home from high school and then have lunch. And while the wildlife documentaries were on, I would have a lovely nap on the sofa.
But it's not as common as it used to be, right?
No, it is not common. 60% of us never have a siesta, 20% occasionally, and 8%, only 8% regularly. I'll tell you though, who does have siestas nowadays? The Germans. Yep, according to a recent study, 22% of Germans say they take 3 naps per week, which is a lot.
So while a siesta might be great, it just ain't happening here. It's happening over in Germany. Go and talk to them. Okay, so here's a myth that I think I sort of slightly might kind of a little bit believe myself. So Spaniards don't eat vegetables. That's the myth. I'm not saying that's the truth, but that's the myth. Spaniards don't eat vegetables.
Don't believe it.
Don't believe it. Well, maybe I kind of, anyway. The amount of times on a Devour food tour that I was leading, I would meet tourists who would say to me, "My kingdom for a salad," because I have been in Spain for a week and I think,
excuse me,
you're getting ill, you're not eating enough vegetables.
Obviously.
And I've been in Spain for a week and I think I'm getting scurvy because I need to get my hands on some fresh vegetables.
So I think this perception comes from the fact that when you're visiting, you do go to a lot of tapas bars. It is true that in certain regions in Spain, you will get a lot of fried food, for example, but that doesn't reflect what people eat at home. Think of it as a different set of dishes, right? So growing up, my mother would cook a lot of stews based on chickpeas, lentils, beans. There will always be a salad at the center of the table, and the way we finish off meals at home is just by eating a piece of fruit. So there you go.
I just want to pull rank though. I don't think, like, lentils and beans are legumes, like they're not actually vegetables. So it might have been that and then chorizo and blood sausage and things like that. I think you might be actually proving the point a little bit here. Okay, so I think the image many people have of Spain is that it's a particularly Catholic country. What's the deal now, Yoly? Are you holy or are you heathens?
Spain is a country where we have, our huge religious parades at Easter. You go to Seville in Semana Santa and it's like, wow, all these people that seem very religious and very,
carrying candles, walking for hours.
Exactly.
Like
but remember that for many, if not most of those people out there doing it, it's more about tradition than about being actively religious and going to mass every Sunday. So for example, in 1980, when asked, only 8.5% of Spaniards didn't believe in God. Say they didn't believe in God.
Were they like all Satanists and wearing horns and stuff like that?
Scary stuff.
Like really out there.
Well, nowadays it's actually 39.3% that don't believe in God.
Almost 40%.
That's
That's
massive.
a huge growth.
Yeah. Even those who do believe don't go to mass that much. 47.5% of those who declare themselves as Catholics don't go to mass, almost ever. And only 10.6% of those who declare themselves Catholics go to mass every Sunday.
Less and less religious, and you're not even going to church if you are religious. So the Pope is not happy. Excommunication for everyone. You're doing it bad. So I think what it shows, Yoly, is that, life in Spain is not simple. It's a complex tapestry. You are complex as Spaniards.
What a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah. Are you complex?
I am very complex, of course, and very beautiful, like a tapestry.
Very good. And look, if you're still curious about Spanish culture, then if you want to see a younger version of us, not too much younger, a little bit younger, talking about things you should definitely not do in Spain, then click on this video that may be appearing over Yoly's face or my face, and we'll see you over there in a moment. All right?
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao. Lost my voice. Ciao. Ciao.